Hey, it's Brian.
And hey, it's Murdoch. Welcome to Rock and Roll Bedtime Stories.
So, do you remember, pop quiz, do you remember the topic of the very first episode of this show over 200 episodes ago?
Yes.
Okay.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah. Well,
I
it's
Want a
still
New
one of
Drug.
our most listened to episodes.
Yeah.
And this is just, encapsulate it for us.
Ghostbusters, the producers wanted I Want a New Drug by Huey Lewis. He wouldn't do it, so they approached Ray Parker Jr. and said, we kind of like this song. And then he did that song. And then everyone sued everybody.
They sound a lot alike.
They do.
So today's discussion comes to us via suggestion from a listener in Payson, Arizona. Her name is Andrea. And it's an interestingly similar case of theme song thievery, sort of.
That's right. And it involves a sitcom theme song that may almost be as recognizable and meaningful as anything for every generation. And that sitcom is Friends.
How do you feel about Friends?
I dated girls with the haircut. And I remember I started watching it, and I was like, this is kind of okay. And then I phased out quick.
So there's a Stones, Beatles delineation in rock music
Seinfeld.
fans. There's a Seinfeld Friends delineation with a lot of TV fans, right? I was definitely on the Friends side. I think you were on the Seinfeld side. That's fine. I liked Seinfeld as well. I used to call it the alarm clock because when I was first in radio, I worked mornings, and I'd come home in the evenings with my wife right after we got married, and I would lay on the couch and we would both fall asleep, and then the local Fox affiliate played Seinfeld at like 6 p.m., and so I would wake up to
Oh, that was your nap.
the nap was over when Seinfeld came on.
That's funny.
But I do love Friends. We used to watch Friends every night before we go to sleep. We have all the box sets, even though it's, now you just have streaming services. So the show does mean a lot to me. But regardless of feelings about the show, whether you like it or you don't like it, almost everybody knows the damn theme song.
Right. And they had more than one song. And I had to play both of these songs on the radio.
Okay, so let's talk about the theme song first. That's a song called I'll Be There For You.
Right.
And the duo is called
The Rembrandts.
The Rembrandts. And you do remember the other song by the Rembrandts. I had forgotten about this song.
Oh, yeah. That's just the way it is, baby. I dislike that one a lot because I had to hear the other one so much, and the other one just felt like that's where we're cashing the checks over here.
Okay, so we're going to talk about this. This is sort of what's happening, right? But, okay, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about the first song. Just the Way It Is, Baby was on their 1990 self-titled debut album. These guys, though, that's a misnomer if I say 1990. Right? Because these guys were making music long before any of that.
Yeah.
Two names to know here that make up the Rembrandts. One of them is Danny Wilde. The other one is Phil Solemn.
Yeah, and that's Danny Wilde from The Quick.
The Quick! Oh, my God, are we going to talk about The Quick? There is so much to unpack here. I have this terrible disdain for the term one-hit wonder.
But what do you call the song Fish Heads? How do you categorize that? Is that
a novelty song?
I guess you do that.
Yeah, there's
versus saying it's a one-hit
novelty
wonder
versus a one-hit wonder, because it boils down. People put years and years and years into a career, and then you're like, "Whoa, good job!" We're judging you by the fact that one time a lot of people knew the one song. Like there are a smaller amount of people that know more than one song by your band. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. But this is a great example of why I hate that term. Because any dumbass list of one-hit wonders that you look at on Business Insider or whatever stupid website, the Rembrandts are going to be on that list, right?
Right.
But they have deep, deep history in rock and roll, so it's very dismissive to just write them off as one-hit wonders. And part of this history, you've already said it, is this band, The Quick. Talk about The Quick.
Yeah, the Too Long Didn't Read, okay? 70s power pop, and they're really influenced by Sparks, and they're friends with the Dickies. Talk about mainstream love for these guys.
Oh, my Lord. So the tentacles of this band spread out all over the place. The lead guitar player goes on to be in the Cruzados, and if you want to talk about the Cruzados, members of that band will be in Dylan's legendary Letter Performance backup band. We've had a whole episode that you can check out. I think it's called Dylan versus Jesus Christ. Go find that one of my favorites.
Yep.
There are loose connections to the Weirdos, to the Runaways. Yes, that would be Joan Jett's band. And they work with Kim Fowley,
douchebag,
and producer David Campbell.
Yeah, David Campbell, by the way, Scientologist and Beck's dad. Just FYI.
Beck's dad.
Yep.
Like I said, tentacles everywhere, even in the Church of Scientology. Okay, the tentacle that we are following, though, is the one that leads to the singer Danny Wilde. Lead singer Danny Wilde, he forms a new group with a bass player named Ian Ainsworth, and they call that Great Buildings.
Right, and that band and their one record for Columbia.
Have you listened to this record?
I did because of the research, yeah.
It's so good.
And what's interesting to me is that it's 1981.
It's 1981.
So it's so old compared to what Friends.
So it takes 10 years. So this is 10 years before.
Yeah. Okay. And it's important because Danny and Ian find a guy for that group to play lead guitar, and his name is Phil Solemn.
Okay, yeah. So this is the Phil's, like I said, the other name you have to know. We're weaving a path real quickly here. Okay, so that band, Great Buildings, breaks up in this classic we can't agree on shit fashion. They're trying to record their second record. And both Danny and Phil from there will try solo careers. Danny even has 3, not 1, not 2, 3 solo records in the 1980s. But there's this interview he does once the Rembrandts hit in 1992 where he describes his solo career, quote, like climbing a mountain. So that means to say it was hard and there was not a lot of success.
Yeah, and Phil moves back to his home of Minneapolis, but the two guys stay in touch, and by the end of the 80s, they decide to get together and do some more home studio recordings and just do whatever they want. They're not trying to do a particular scene or fit in anywhere, but that's how the Rembrandts, that's how they were born.
And so they get signed to Atco Records, and they're
on the same label as the Stones
at
one point.
Stones, and they put out the self-titled debut. The first track on that record is Just the Way It Is, Baby, and that song goes on to number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1990. So give us the quick rundown on Atco, because like you just said, the Stones. Yeah, but there's a detail here that's going to be really important.
Yeah, in the 50s, it was built and designed to be a spinoff for Atlantic. So they wanted to put stuff on that label that didn't fit in the established Atlantic brand. And they were going to call it Atlas, but discovered a label already had that name, of course. And so they got super creative and called it Atco, which is an abbreviation for Atlantic Corporation.
I know. I was hoping it was going to be so much cooler than that.
No.
Lots of big singles and albums will live on Atco over the next several decades. But that's not what we're here to talk about. Instead, for our purposes, because this is part of Atlantic, by the time the Rembrandts are on this label, it means it is part of the behemoth that is WEA, which stands for
Warner Entertainment Assholes.
And shortly after that number 14 hit, Just the Way It Is, Baby, in 1990, it will be renamed Warner Music.
That's right. And
1991.
Right, and it might be worth doing a larger episode just explaining all that record label shenanigans.
It's wild, and it was very hard to not get distracted in the research walking through how this happens.
Yeah.
So if you have interest in this, we may let us know, because it is very, very deep in the music industry, but there's a lot to unpack there about how the labels kind of, they compete and then they become one big thing.
Yeah, and so now, since everything's sort of consolidated, Warner Music has a TV component, which is Warner Brothers Television, WB, and you can see Animaniacs like coming out of your screen. But that brings us back to Friends.
It does. Marta Kaufman, David Crane, they go to Brandeis University in 1978. And they were cast in a Tennessee Williams play together. That's how they meet.
That's just like how you and I met.
Actually, we were cast in Waiting for Godot. I played Godot. I don't think Godot is actually in Waiting for Godot. That's the joke. Okay, so Friends doesn't happen until 1994. So to your point earlier about Rembrandts being in these bands in 1981, this is the late 70s, early 80s, and these two will spend 15 years together writing and creating stuff. So they write a Broadway review. In the mid-80s, they get a TV development deal with Norman Lear.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't know who that is, just Google that, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.
Mr. Television.
Yeah, a whole lot of what we know as the American sitcom is because of Norman Lear. They will actually write a show for Norman Lear's production company called The Powers That Be. It's fairly short-lived, and then eventually they will create something called Dream On. Did you ever watch Dream On HBO?
I forgot that I did, but I had to look it up to remember it.
Yeah. So that was moderately successful, but it was still on HBO, so it wasn't beaming into Brian's house in the early 90s. We did not have that. In 93, around the holidays, they start writing this concept for a show they've come up with called Insomnia Cafe.
I can't believe you didn't have HBO in the early 90s. And I had HBO, Skinamax, and Showtime in the 80s.
Listen, I had an Atari in the year 1994.
Oh.
And it was like, hey, we got you one of those video game systems from a yard sale.
Yeah. But anyway, so the story they will tell is that Marta gets inspired by driving by a funky-looking coffee shop in L.A. after moving there with David and leaving all of their friends behind in NYC. She sees groups of people enjoying each other's company, gets nostalgic, and then thinks, well, this would make a great TV show about the coffee shop.
Turns out she was right. So industry context to be added here, okay? This is fun. If I know that we are a rock and roll pod, but you know I love TV and movies as well. We're going to do a little TV history here, give you some context. Seinfeld had pointed something out about audiences, right? Early 90s. Now there is this new group of young people, like a young Murdoch around that time, because you're how old in 91?
17.
Okay. So you're actually a little younger. So people probably 5 years older than you, right? They haven't really seen themselves reflected on television.
And at 17, I haven't been to a coffee shop. I didn't know what the hell those things are.
Young urban folks who are living in cities and not in Tennessee, no shame, or Kentucky.
Go Balls.
They were not seeing themselves because up to this point, sitcoms were focused on the traditional family unit. I hadn't thought about this, but you know, you've got All in the Family, you got Happy Days, you just name anything from those Family Ties.
Yeah.
Even Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like these are all while they're starting to get less traditional family units, they're still family units.
Like Cheers was still kind of a family unit.
Roseanne, Full House, right? They might not be 1950s families, but they were family units. But NBC sees with Seinfeld that people are interested in single people. So they're looking for something to pair with Seinfeld. And this group of single friends living and working in an urban setting that Marta and David bring to them, this sounds like a marketable idea because that's kind of what they're looking for.
Yeah. And imagine how many people used to watch Cheers 40 years ago. And it's a family, but they're not at home with their family. They're right. Anyway, so they initially start to call this Insomnia Cafe. That was the first idea. Right. Then Six of One. Then Friends Like Us. And then Friends.
They deliver the pilot to NBC in March of 1994, and it premieres that fall, so that's pretty quick. There's a link to the original pilot script in the show notes if you want to see what it looked like in March versus what it will look like in September. It's sort of funny because there's a lot of changes made in those last few months.
Yeah, but between March and September, that's where the story happens. So Marta and David and the folks at NBC are asking the question, how do we set the stage, the story, for the moment when it opens? So
again, if we can do some more TV history, what do you know about the history of TV theme songs?
I'm a Gen Xer.
Just sing some of your favorites.
I was gonna go. Dun, 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 dun. Welcome to the $100,000 pyramid. And I can't sing Sanford and Son. I know Good Times. It's Good Times. Good Times.
So we do have a slight age gap, right? And I definitely know TV theme songs, but I thought you would think this was funny. When I was in 5th grade, we had a mandatory music class that we would take twice a week. Did you have mandatory music classes where you would go and sing out of a book?
Nah.
Okay.
But we had music. We would have music classes, and they would just pull it.
Never mind. We're canceling that.
Yeah, we're physics. You don't need that either. They pulled
science. Get out of here, Tennessee.
We lost physics my senior year. We didn't have music. There was music maybe my freshman year, but then that was
okay. So I'm talking elementary school. I had elementary school music class.
We did, and her name was Miss Knott, and all of us called her
Miss Naughty.
No, Miss Snot. You missed the easy joke. And she had an accordion thing, and it was all overmodulated, and everything about it was out of a freaking movie, dude. So it was oh, Susanna, she'll be coming around the mountain.
Okay.
All those old traditional folk songs.
Our curriculum in 5th grade music I guess it was somebody trying to spice it up and make it more modern, so it wasn't just Coming Around the Mountain.
Was it Peebo Bryson?
No.
Al Jarreau?
No, it was the theme song, The Greatest American Hero.
by Scarborough, whatever his name is?
Believe it or not,
yeah.
I'm walking on air.
Ken Scarborough?
Never
is that his name?
I could be so free.
That's a theme song and not a one-hit wonder.
Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, if no one has ever seen The Greatest American Hero, hit that on YouTube. I don't even understand. So he was a hero, but he turned into he had a superhero costume, but he's really shitty at flying. Like that was the joke, right?
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air.
Yeah, he just sucked at flying. Like he could fly, but he was shitty at it. I don't remember a damn thing about that except he had a red costume.
Did you like the theme song? Like, why was that theme song in my choir book?
I had that 45.
That's why.
That's because that song was great. Look at what's happened to me. Like,
yeah. So other songs in that songbook, Rainbow Connection. How do you feel about that one?
Oh, it's like I just saw the 45th edition on the screen. Yeah, I cried like during the beginning of it with the long crane shot when they're in the swamp and he's singing. Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and also that's where I learned my 5th grade choir book was where I learned Sloop John B by the Beach Boys.
Oh,
which is a really sad song. I just remember being like, I feel bad for this guy. He's really homesick. Yeah. I remember homesick was a thing that I got when I was in 5th grade, and I was like, that was a song that really connected with me.
Did you ever watch soaps?
No.
No daytime soaps?
No way.
That was not allowed.
That was not allowed.
Because those people were fucking.
Yeah.
Those daytime, those actors would be.
Those actors were fading to black, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's right. There were things happening.
Yeah. Anyway, theme songs. Okay. Tell us. Here we go. There's a quote from Robert Thompson, Syracuse University, all right, professor of television and pop culture. I like this. Quote, in the very earliest days of TV, the purpose of the TV theme song was to actually be the first commercial in the program. So you didn't know this?
No.
Now, I used to listen to a lot of old radio, and when I read this came back to me, that there was a sponsor, just like you still see sponsors at sporting events, right? Or where was I? I was at some sporting event the other night, and it was like, it was the soccer game that we were both at.
Yeah.
That was brought to you by Fifth Third Bank, right? Like,
yeah.
That. So shows used to be like that too, and they say it goes back all the way to the Texaco Star Theater. It's like sometimes the whole show would be brought to you by somebody. So they would just say, instead of being like, this is the whatever, they just sold the branding right into it, and then they would do commercials. Texaco Star Theater.
Yeah, or cigarettes, right? But as this starts to get more expensive to produce, no one company is footing the entire bill, so the theme song starts to function less as an ad and more as a reminder, an alarm clock. Hey, Mr. Ed theme song is on. That means it's time for Mr. Ed.
Like the Seinfeld theme song. It's time for 20-year-old Brian to go eat dinner.
Yeah.
Okay, so they sometimes would also be a little bit like a sneak preview or a commercial for the show itself. So, like, if you didn't really know what the show was about, and these are the cool ones from the 80s where, like, everybody stops and smiles at the camera. Tell me a couple of your favorites from that period.
Theme songs?
Theme songs or just openings, where, like...
Three's Company.
Okay.
Like, everything about that, because it like, the visuals even sort of show you, it's like, maybe Jack Tripper really is gay, but like he ain't, man. Like that's a ruse. MASH?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Suicide is Painless. Like super sad song, right? Another game show, Price is Right. All the additional auxiliary music that's in the Price is Right, where it's like, now we're gonna play Plinko, and it's like the music behind while he's explaining Plinko.
What's the one where the mountain climber goes up?
The yodeler, whatever that thing's called.
Yeah.
I don't know what everyone hates that.
Yeah,
that game.
I don't hate that game.
Oh, people do not like the yodeler.
All right, I apologize for being behind the times on the appropriateness and desirability of certain Price is Right music.
Yeah, but your choir book had really good fun songs in it, other than The Greatest American Hero.
It just had that. So I read an interesting thing in the research about executives around this time being really leery of TV theme songs because of the remote control.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah, that's strange. Some networks were trying to banned them from their programming because they were worried that people would like hear the theme song and then be like, oh, cool, now I'm going to surf away and never come back to this program.
Yeah, and there's a piece in the show notes that includes an interview with a guy named Scott Shearer. Is that how we think we say his name? He wrote a ton of theme songs over the past few decades, and this is just reading a section from this article. Scott said that when he first got into business, there was a lot of debate about whether the people who did this kind of work were as important as the people who wrote songs you heard on the radio.
Ooh.
In the early 90s, however, he said that started to change because the same people who were doing one kind of writing during the day were doing the other kind at night. So a lot of guys that were doing moonlighting during the day or at night doing commercials that were also on tour with really well-known artists and bands. And there became a point where the talent and the equipment and the art in creating the music for a commercial and themes for TV required the same ability and talent as writing a hit song. And that's kind of where we kind of come full circle with all this.
So this got me thinking about Jesse Frederick. And I know this is a rabbit trail, but do you know who that is?
I didn't know at all.
Okay, so
only from you putting this together.
This is amazing. So this guy, I'm about ready to blow some millennial minds. If you are like roughly 40 right now, get ready. Okay, so Albert Grossman. Just remind the audience, who is Albert Grossman?
This is super famous producer. He signed Bob Dylan.
Dylan and Janis Joplin. He probably killed Janis Joplin.
Yeah.
Okay, so puts out a record or two. This guy Albert Grossman has Bearsville Records, and he signs Jesse Frederick in 1971, and they put out a couple of records on Columbia. But he never takes off. They don't really work. And so he starts doing movie and TV composing like by the late 70s, early 80s. And he meets this dude named Paul Bennett Salve. And long story short, they inadvertently become like a package. They become like the Brian and Murdoch of writing music for this other duo who are making TV. So there's two guys making TV, and they come and find these two guys who are making music. And they start, when they make a TV show, they bring Jesse Frederick and Paul Bennett Salve to write the theme song. And so those two guys, if you know anything about your TV trivia, are Thomas Miller and Robert Boyer. And they are a powerhouse in the late 80s, early 90s, and have a string of massive hits. And Jesse and Paul write a bunch of the 90-second theme songs that people of a certain age all know by heart. You ready for this list?
Yes.
Perfect Strangers, Family Matters, Full House, and Step by Step. And all of these songs are sung by Jesse Frederick, a guy who had his first album mixed by Todd Rundgren.
By Todd Rundgren! None of this makes any sense. By the way, of that list of shows, so the only one for me is Perfect Strangers.
I was going to say, I said millennial. Like, there is going to be a sharp cutoff where people are not going to care about this. But if you're of a certain age, those 4 shows, like, changed your life, right? 5 shows. So, 4 shows. Perfect Strangers was the one that I loved the most.
Yeah. Of those, that's the one I like.
Yeah. Oh, man. Balki Bartagamus from Mypos.
I mean, do people have problems with people dressing up in drag? Did they see the show? I mean, I don't know.
It's so good. And Family Matters. Some people may not know this because Perfect Strangers is the most obscure of those, probably.
Totally.
And Family Matters is a spinoff from Perfect Strangers because Harriet worked in their building.
Weird, right?
It's so good how that all works. All right, I bring this up because it does illustrate the TV theme environment directly before Friends. So up until we got to Friends, like Scott Shearer pointed out, it became prudent to hire proven songwriters and rockers to write specifically for your show.
Right. But Marta and David are writing this show that is meant to be very young and very hip. So when they envision the opening credits, they have a song in mind, and that is Shiny Happy People by R.E.M.
And when they shoot the pilot in 1994, this is the song that they put over the opening credits. So remember I said they turn in the pilot in March, the show airs in September, and in between there, some things happen, both to the script and to the way that it is presented. And one of those things that happens is there is some tension over this theme song, Shiny Happy People. Are you a Shiny Happy People guy?
Yeah. I love that record, actually.
Okay.
I will totally admit to really completely enjoying that. It does not end up being the official theme song, as everyone knows.
No.
We've already kind of discussed that it's the Rembrandts.
There's this 2019 NME interview with Michael Stipe and Mike Mills, where the interviewer asks a question. Read that.
Yeah. So here's the question overall: is were there any songs inspired by watching episodes of Friends?
Which seems like a weird question for a random interview in 2019.
So Stipe says, no, of course not, but I think they went to REM first for the theme song, and they said no. I like they said no. Like he's like, yeah, I don't know who those
this
people
interview's weird. This section of this interview is strange.
Mills says apparently they were thinking about using Shiny Happy People as the theme song, which I just recently heard about, but apparently that's the case. Then Stipe said, then they went to another band and said, can you write an REM song? And they did. That's what I've heard. I don't want to diss that band. I don't remember who they are, but it's a good song. That's kind of nice.
So, hold on.
He could have said, that's not Tom Waits.
So,
but, right? It's like, that's an impersonator.
This is the version of the story that REM will tell. Okay? It, like most of the things we tackle on this show, this is just one version of this story. And every other party involved will tell the story slightly differently.
Right. Stipe says they said no in that interview. Shouldn't it be we said no?
So I find is it management? Is it the label? I don't know. I find the idea of them turning this down strange. I didn't at first. At first I thought, okay, these guys were very worried about their image and they're very alt. I mean, we haven't really talked a ton about REM on the show, though we've gotten a lot of requests, so that probably has to happen.
But their songs have been in other shows.
Their songs have been in lots of other shows. And one of those shows, I was curious if you remember this. Remember Get a Life?
With Chris Elliott?
Yeah.
Sure.
So
I watched him on the Letterman, the NBC Letterman, when he would come out of the floor.
And now do you watch The Bear and think about how Sugar is his daughter?
It's weird. I am behind. I'm just into season 2, and I understand that.
Okay.
And I started watching some barbecue showdown show on Netflix or something, and the guy who comes out and is like, we've got a surprise guest. It's Chef and Chef comes out, and he's like the executive producer of The Bear. He's a chef, but he also does that. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I was sucked in reading this, watching that, but not watching The Bear. So instead I watched reality TV and watched that.
So back to Sugar's dad.
Yes.
Chris Elliott is in this show, Get a Life. It was on Fox from 98 to 92, so just a couple years. Famously, Chris Elliott, Charlie Kaufman, and Bob Odenkirk, if you're a movie jerk, your head just exploded. They all wrote that show together. I'm saying it again. Bob Odenkirk, Charlie freaking Kaufman, and Chris Elliott wrote this show together.
Better Call Saul, Bob Odenkirk.
Yeah.
Mr. Show.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah.
Adaptation, Charlie Kaufman, with Chris Elliott, Sugar's dad. So, how many times I gotta say that? So,
Chris Elliott, Schitt's Creek.
Oh yeah, that's a good reference, right? Yeah. And something about Mary. He's very memorable in something about Mary.
Yeah, I forgot. Theme song of that show?
It's Stand by R.E.M.
Which is so weird. It's like, that's a big song.
It's a huge song. Now, the show's a little different.
Yeah, that show is always looking to be a little bit more counterculture, weird. And
it's so weird.
Yeah.
I was reading episode synopses of that show.
That's great.
It's so weird.
Yeah, it was on Fox, so luckily they had a couple years to be on the air.
Be totally weird.
It wouldn't have lasted on another network at that time.
Oh, no way. Okay, so R.E.M., though, this isn't the only case. Like, you make a good case. Like, that show is also sort of indie, you know? And so if, like, R.E.M.'s like, well, we're the college rock band, or we're the indie band, or we're like we don't kneel to the man, or whatever justification they may have had, this show maybe fits in that. But they do allow their songs to be used inside episodes of very popular shows. Everybody Hurts is in My So-Called Life around that time.
Yes.
They do end up using Shiny Happy People in an episode of Friends.
Right. It's not the theme song.
But it's not the theme song.
So R.E.M. tells them no, but what do the Friends people decide to do?
And so this is where
theme song.
Right. This is where we get sort of into a similar space of this Ghostbusters story. Because again, R.E.M. basically says they pull a Ghostbusters, that they tried to get a fake R.E.M. song. Now, this isn't really how anyone else will talk about it. The Rembrandts in 2014 do an interview, and they tell the story this way.
Right. This is, according to them, the creators of Friends liked R.E.M., notably in the article that they reference Into the World and not Shiny Happy People, which to me it's like, yeah, I'd take Shiny Happy People over the other. Here's a quote from that piece. Kevin Bright, who worked with Marta and David, had it in his head that he didn't want to have a jingle writer write the theme song for the show. He was a fan of the Rembrandts from the other records that we had made, so he called our manager. Our manager called us on a Monday, and we said, sure, we'll try it out. We'll see what happens. And that's kind of it.
Okay, so the Rembrandts
were asked.
They say they were asked. So R.E.M. says that the producers just tried to find a ripoff song. The Rembrandts say that the producers liked them and were like huge fans and were like, let's call our buddies in the Rembrandts. And then they go on in this article to talk about going to writing sessions with the creators of the show. This is the only place I found this version of the story, and it's being told specifically by the Rembrandts, who, of course, would probably want to, for their own personal narrative, enhance their role in this whole thing. This is not how I heard it told anywhere else.
Right. The prevailing version seems to be this. They can't get Shiny Happy People, so Marta Kaufman's husband, a guy named Michael Skloff, writes the bones of what will become I'll Be There For You. And his version of the story is that he had been listening to a band called the Beatles and not R.E.M.
Yeah, so his musical touch point when in interviews when people ask him about this song is Paperback Writer.
Hear it?
100%.
Right there.
It sounds way more like Paperback Writer than it does Shiny Happy People in spirit. Yeah,
it's the lick is.
He's very much ripping off like Obladi Oblada and Paperback Writer, like 100%. Skloff had written the theme song for Dream On HBO as well. So they had a history of collaborating, him and his wife, right? So he's married to Marta. And so they were all friends. And Marta and David and Michael had worked together. Like even when they were working on, I said they did some Broadway stuff. They were working together on that as well.
And then people involved with the show, I don't know if it was with the network execs or who, but they said, we need some cross-pollination. I want to say this in that voice. Can I do that?
Yeah.
We need some cross-pollination. Let's get someone from Warner Music to sing this.
Pollinization. And so, yeah, so this is the other version of this story that I've heard, is that they have the theme song from this composer. Mm-hmm. They need somebody to perform it. They're like, cool, find somebody. This is why I pointed out the thing about Warner. Because there's Warner, it becomes Warner Music, and then there's Warner Television, and they're all under the same roof. So they're like, well, let's just go to the music department and use somebody from over there. And they can't, I mean, I have heard that they couldn't find anybody else to do it. And they find this one band who is on the verge of probably having to leave the label because they haven't had a hit in 5 years.
And they're called the Rembrandts. So this is how they spin it. This is Phil talking. Michael Skloff was the only guy who was responsible for the music and the vibe of the show. He had an idea for how the song ought to go, so we got together and we pitched some ideas. Solemn said. We Rembrandtified it.
That's not a word.
No. We just checking. No. We were like, if it's going to be us, it's got to be this. We wouldn't say that. We'd say this.
Okay. Maybe that's true. I have a couple reasons why I don't think it's true.
Why is that?
The first one is that if you look at the songwriting credits, they did indeed get some help.
Mm-hmm.
But they got some help, and when I say they, I mean Michael Skloff. Michael Skloff, yeah, sure, he got some help from the Rembrandts, but they brought in someone else from the Warner Brothers fold, and that is someone with a much more impressive CV, and her name is Allee Willis.
So Allee Willis put an album of her own out in 1974.
Again, these timelines are crazy.
And it didn't sell. But she does make friends with a woman who I loved when it was like the Daily Mail or something was like, what an upset album of the year from this upstart Bonnie Raitt. Like they didn't know. The Daily Mail didn't know who the frick Bonnie Raitt was. Anyway, so Allie gets hooked up with Bonnie Raitt, who will record one of her songs and put it on the path of her being a songwriter, and then she'll write legendary stuff. Not the least of which is an Earth, Wind, and Fire song that's called September.
Yeah. Oh a white woman in the 70s wrote September. But the reason to bring her in on this job probably had more to do with the music because she'd written for other films. She'd written for Karate Kid. She wrote a theme. She wrote for Beverly Hills Cop. And so she knew how to write a banger of a theme song. So I'm not sure I buy this idea that we need to Rembrandtify this. I can't imagine. If you were going to do that, you don't need Allie Willis. And I'm sure Allie Willis was not cheap. But she instead came in and provided this service to polish up this song.
Hey, in the original Karate Kid, my favorite song in that movie, which I don't know if it's her and I don't think it is the "You're the best and nothing's gonna bring you down, no, you're the best around."
I think that is her. I'll have it fact checked, but I think that's the song.
Because I wasn't sure if it was, because we had a what's the American Ninja Warrior. When my youngest daughter was super young, we had an American Ninja Warrior party.
Oh, yeah.
And we just played that song in a loop. And at some point, my wife comes over and she's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, "This is the song from the Karate Kid. This is the song that all the kids need to be listening to while they're running on their journey to the end of the finish line." Like a complete moron.
I've got good news. The producers just sent us a note. That was indeed the lyrics of that song were written by Allie Willis.
Yes!
Yeah, that's
awesome.
That's
okay.
Her.
So anyway, they write this 45-second piece of music to be used as a theme song, which to me is a jingle. Okay. That should be the end of the story. And if it was, we might have totally forgotten who the Rembrandts were altogether.
Yeah,
but instead, this story becomes another reminder of how powerful radio used to be.
Yeah. Did you ever listen to Y107 in Nashville?
Y107.5. I used to know the call letters.
Did you ever listen to the guy Charlie Quinn?
Yes.
Yeah, so Charlie Quinn wanted to play the theme song on the radio when Friends started getting popular. But he understood that 45 seconds was way too short for commercial radio. You and I know this from our past in commercial radio. Can't do a 45-second song. So what he does is he loops it.
Yeah. So here's Danny Wilde talking. It got a crazy amount of requests. The phone line started blowing up, and all the sister stations, which by that time, I guess you've got the deconsolidation of the ownership of radio stations, maybe.
Yeah.
I guess. All the sister stations started playing it. It went national, Wilde said. Our record at the time, LP, that was the name of their LP, was already finished, and advanced copies were already shipped to radio, but the record company said, "Stop the presses!" Sorry, I always wanted to say that. Wait a second. We've got this crazy runaway hit. So they went in, recorded the full version, and then scrapped all the other cassettes, CDs, and vinyl and added it to the record. They should have taken all the older ones and buried it with those ET cartridges for your Atari 2600 that you got when you were 18.
Isn't it wild that they took the loss because they knew how big this song was going to be? And I will say that I used to be the CD bin bargain hunting kid of the world. You know, you go to used CD stores and stuff, and you could always find 400 copies of LP by the Rembrandts.
Yeah.
So many people bought that record specifically for this. What was 45 seconds ended up being like 2 minutes and 5 seconds when it was all done or something like that.
Let's add hand claps.
Okay, this is the other reason that I don't think the Rembrandts version of the story is true, though. Okay. They say they were handpicked and had a lot to say on Rembrandtifying the song the first time, right? If that's true, why weren't they allowed to write the lyrics the second time? Read the quote.
All right. This is from that article. Solomon Wilde thought they'd be able to write the full-length version of the song themselves, but the brains behind Friends were still very much involved. Quote, "Here's what was really crazy. At that point, the producers got in on the writing. So we just all sat around tossing ideas around." Solomon said there was a lot of interaction. It was like 7 people.
Yeah, let me tell you how I read that. I read that as the Rembrandts show up with extended lyrics, and the producers are like,
We're going to go with these over here.
We're good, buddies. Thanks for dropping by. I actually heard that they were like dark. Like, I don't know if they were like, "Yeah, life never gets better. Things really, really suck. I'm in my 40s, and people think I just wrote this one hit, but I wrote a song in 1990, and I had a band in 1981.
I'm Jennifer Aniston. I'm never going to get married ever, even if I get a different haircut at all." And no one no one that's on this show is ever going to have a successful television career outside of this show ever again.
I just do not buy that if they weren't allowed to work on the second version of the song, that they were allowed to work on the first version of the song.
No.
No
Absolutely
way.
not.
No way.
So the Rembrandts do stick around for a few more years and ride this out, which has to be a lot of fun to have all that cocaine mailbox money they got. But it's 97, they split.
When was the last time you looked at the track listing for the Friends soundtrack album? Do you remember that? The first one. There was like several, but there's the first one that they dropped in the fall of 95.
I don't, because Hootie was on there, and that's just automatically I'm allergic to that.
Okay, Hootie was on there, but what you're not allergic to is that there is not one. There are 2 Paul Westerberg songs on that CD.
Oh.
Yeah, the rest of it's indie as hell. But they went and got They got Hootie and the Blowfish because that's a huge Hootie and the Blowfish single, which isn't on any of the Hootie and the Blowfish records. And that was like, I don't know, hit number 5 or something for them.
Was Sunshine by Jonathan Edwards on that soundtrack?
Maybe.
Sunshine, Go Away Today. I Don't Feel Much Like Dancing. It's like a song from the 70s.
We can look at that track listing
because for some reason I have that in my head, and I remember hearing that song and then realizing that was maybe on the Friends soundtrack, and that really just I could not fathom that was the deal. But now you're going to bring it to real. Okay, let's look at the track listing.
Okay, track listing here. We got Hootie and the Blowfish, the Rembrandts, Toad the Wet Sprocket, Lou Reed, Katie Lang, Bare Naked Ladies, R.E.M. So R.E.M. has a song on the 1995 soundtrack.
It's a Free World, baby.
Then you've got Paul Westerberg song number 1, Sunshine. You got The Pretenders, In My Room by Grantley Buffalo, Big Yellow Taxi by Joni Mitchell.
Great song.
Stain Your Blood.
Great song.
That's a second Paul Westerberg track. And then I'll Be There For You by the Rembrandts, the extended version that they didn't write. So there. I think, though, I mean, your song you're thinking of maybe on one of the other ones, because there ends up being like at least 2 or 3.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because I remember seeing like a cutout or something of like that. Like it was a cutout Friends CD, but I remember seeing that. So
yeah.
But anyway, I don't think they wrote all of it.
A wild story. Thank you for the inquiry. If you have a question about something in rock and roll history, in music history that you've always wanted to know, please send it our direction. It's wearethestoryguys@gmail.com. Thank you for everyone who has been kicking in at the patreon.com/rockandrollbedtime stories. It's very helpful. To our new friends who have come along in the last few weeks, we thank you very much, smooches. And we will be getting some new content up there for you very, very soon. Exclusive stuff you can only get there. And also, everybody who has been finding us on YouTube, welcome to the show. You can now access most of our audio episodes and quite a bit of video if you want to see us drink beer and talk about rock and roll instead of just listen to us.
Right in front of this library that's real.
You can do that at YouTube.com/ I don't know. Look it up. Rock and Roll Bedtime Stories. And until next time, what should people keep doing?
Keep telling stories.
See ya.
It got better.